We don't need no education. Actually, that's a double negative.
Welcome to The Big Puzzle. In this podcast, we explore the subtle connections between science, religion, politics, economics, and history. One piece at a time, we unveil the big picture of this shared experience that we call life.
So, interestingly enough, I was forced to watch Pink Floyd's The Wall when I was in high school. Didn't like it at all. Haven't watched it since, and I'm not intending to. But I thought that the topic of The Wall could be a good introduction for this video, because we're going to be talking about a wall that is ever present, and it's what we call the complexity wall, and it's related to a principle sometimes called the law, that is the law of diminishing returns. We're going to apply that to mostly to science, but then I want to show you how it applies to other fields or other problems. So what is the complexity wall? So the complexity wall is a figure that says that wherever you're making progress, that progress starts being fast, but then it becomes more and more slow because whatever you're doing, it becomes more complex. Right? And that is why it's related to the law of diminishing returns. So when you start doing something new, you get, big returns, but as you move forward, those returns become smaller and smaller until you basically stop getting any returns. I think a good example, like I was saying, is in science. And when we talked in a previous video, probably 1 year ago, about the false dichotomy between science and faith, I mentioned that one way to explain it is by using this analogy of the two lands, with a big chasm in the middle. So you have two bridges. So one is the land of facts, the other is the land of truth. And how science is designed to build bridges from the land of facts, trying to land on the land of truth. But it can never reach it by definition. So today we're going to be talking a lot about why it can never reach. You can never find truth through science. And the faith is actually going from the land of truth to the land of facts. So you start by knowing things that are true, but you cannot land that bridge on the facts. You can demonstrate, if you will, scientifically your truth. So those lands are disconnected, but we're expected to grow both of those bridges because there's a lot of learning in doing that. But let's go back now to the land of facts and how science builds that bridge. So true scientists know this, and they accept it as part of the way science works. So the scientific method is about coming up with potential explanations, designing experiments to see if those explanations fit the data that we have, and then come up with a conclusion. And that conclusion is temporary. Why is temporary? Because you cannot guarantee that at some point you will get a new fact that disproves everything that your explanation said. Right? So the scientific method, well understood, says that it's temporary. You find temporary explanations. Temporary could mean millennia, right? And you grow more certain when no new facts arise, but you can always get that weird fact that disproves everything. And we will see some examples. But what happens when that new fact arises? Well, that's where the complexity wall shows its head. Let's use one example that I think is pretty much everybody knows about it. So, in the primitive societies, they obviously spend a long time looking at the sky. Why? Because, well, the sky is always above you. And you end up finding patterns there. The most obvious pattern is a pattern between day and night. So you see something that comes up in the east, goes through the sky, and settles on the west. And that, well, is the sun. Right? So for most of the primitive cultures, the sun is considered God because it brings life and, all these things. But for some of them it was hard to explain the sun. So because, it always comes from the east, but then it goes out on the west. It's not like it's coming back from the west back to the east. So it's what happens during the night. So some very, very primitive cultures, they thought that each sun was a new sun, right? So that it was born and it would die throughout the day, and then you have another one coming, because it's basically coming from another place. But no, people with a little more intellectual curiosity, they say, well, it goes in a circle, so it's pretty much, we're sure that it would take, a path following that circle, below us, and then it will come up on the other side. So they came up with this idea that the sun and also the moon would go around the earth. Even though they felt like the earth was flat and it was, they still understood this idea, So there's something to learn about that. And it's that the earth is not infinite. Because if the sun goes down, then it has to go through something, or at least there's a hole, right? But people who started moving and navigators, explorers, they realized that wherever they moved, they saw the same thing. So it was not like there was a big hole somewhere there and the sun would go down, because also you could see that it didn't go down in the same place throughout the year, right? Depending on what hemisphere you were, it would move from south to north throughout the year and back. And that led to other cycles, that now we call the seasons. So now that we are all educated and we're all very intelligent, we think that those people are stupid. Yeah, they didn't know that it was not that way, that the earth is not flat. But really, it really looks like that. And in a certain way, if you don't have the instruments, you will believe the same thing. Right? If you don't have the ability to travel, you wouldn't know about any of these things. So we can't really blame them. With the knowledge and the instruments that they had, they did a very good job. They realized, that the earth is static and there's something going around the earth. Now we call that the heliocentric approach. Because it also happened with the stars. So the star seems to be fixed above the earth, but also would move throughout the year. So they started to try to come with some explanations about those things. And there were some kind of stars that were really, really bothering people. Because the sun and the moon, yeah, they go up in a circle, pretty much. Easy to explain. We see circles all over the place. But then we have this particular kind of stars that they call the planets. And if I recall correctly, planets is the word for vagabond. Why did they choose that name? Because they wouldn't follow a circle. Or they would in a way, but not at a regular pace. Some of the planets will go fast and then slow down, and then go fast again, and then slow down, and then go fast again. But others would even go backwards. So they will fast, they will stop, they will go backwards, and they will, start going the same direction again. So they say, well, these are different. These entities have some, will of their own, and that's why they associated gods with those particular type of stars, the planets. Good, but still, how do we explain that movement? Right? How do we scientifically explain that movement? And we have several approaches, but the one that we probably know the most is the one that Claudius Ptolemy developed. So his explanation was, okay, yeah, the planets are also going around the Earth. You see them, following those lines. But he overimposed on those orbits around the Earth something that he called epicycles. So an epicycle is basically the planet is not going on the orbit, the planet is going on another orbit around the orbit. So if you think that the planet look from above will go like this, right? Think about the spirograph. And if you set it up correctly, you could kind of match what you were seeing. But think about this, a circle is simple. A spirograph is not simple. So you see that the explanation for the new observations had to become more complex. And every new thing that they saw, they make things more and more complex. And they were kind of fond of mathematics. They wanted to explain. Remember, these were Greeks and Romans, and they really wanted to find, the mathematical formula for everything. And they were very good at that. Without calculator, without computers, they are way better than we are today. But at some point, all those explanations were too complex. So if you think about epicycles, I will call that a patch to the simple theory. And the first indication that you're running into the complexity wall is that you start seeing more and more patches. So at some point you say, this makes no sense. Why the heck are we defending this? And it had to do with, a religious point of view, that the Earth was the center of the universe because God created the Earth, though he created the universe or whatever. But also, that Jerusalem was at the center of the Earth, and all the continents were related to Jerusalem because that's where Jesus lived. And again, you get the idea. That created a constraint on what you could do. That was, you shouldn't have those constraints in science. You should have complete freedom to think about any potential explanation. And some people had that freedom. So one of those was Nicholas Copernicus. And, they, I said the heliocentric before, I think. I was wrong. I mean the geocentric. But because the heliocentric is basically saying, if we think that, the sun is the center of the universe, and we make the Earth a sphere that rotates, then you say that the Earth is like all the other, it's one planet, so all the other planets are doing the same thing. Then you can explain it really easy, because you go back to circles. Again, everything is a circle. It's not just, the epicycle. Technically, it's a circle, but you know what I mean. It's way more complicated and difficult to explain. Hello.
YouTube video?
Yeah,
Nice. For what's the name of the channel?
it's called The Big Puzzle.
I'll have to look it up because other people have come and I've seen a few others on here and they'll do like a live stream and they'll go like the Candy Bomber and like the guy who invented the TV Philo Farm.
Oh yeah, I talk about him. I actually live across the street, so yeah.
Nice. I'm gonna even look it up. What is it?
The Big Puzzle.
The
It's a big puzzle.
puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not many views or followers, but just a way for me to dump some of my thoughts and ideas. Well, yeah, you're welcome to
I'll look at
visit
it.
and yeah.
How long till it's on?
How long?
Yeah.
It's been over.
How long till that one gets on?
Oh, probably today.
Oh, fast. Okay.
Yeah.
Start out.
See? Good. I'll keep this here. So, hi, if you actually watch it. So, talking about you have a simpler version of the universe that you can explain, and that's the heliocentric. Helio being, the Greek name of the sun. And well, that worked pretty well. And then we came up with Sir Isaac Newton. I mean, I'm jumping a lot of things, right? But well, I don't want to skip Galileo Galilei, who actually, through observation, could prove some of the hypotheses that Copernicus had, presented as a theory. So Galileo Galilei was also important, and he had to sacrifice a lot, especially in relationship with the Catholic Church. But then we get to Newton. Newton came up with this idea of gravity and a way to, he's the father of modern physics. And he would explain how these circles would actually work depending on the masses of the sun, of the planets, and so on. But there were some other, consequences about this. First of all, they realized they are not circles, they're ellipses. So interesting, becomes a little more complex, but without, the mathematical complexity. It doesn't feel like a patch, it feels like, oh, we're understanding it better. But then you end up understanding that not even the sun is the center of the universe, because you can see how the sun is actually also moving, also rotating. And you have galaxies, you have clusters of galaxies, and all of that. But that lasted for a few centuries, and it's mostly what we know about physics today, and in particular astrophysics or astronomy. But then another fact arose that couldn't be explained by Newton. And that was that Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, when it gets close to the sun, its position was not what the theory would say that it should be. So Mercury would be in a different position than what Newtonian physics would predict. And a lot of people struggle with that, trying to find explanation. And there was ideas about ether. Instead of being a vacuum, there was ether, and and a lot of fluid dynamic involved in that explanation. But at the end of the day, we find Einstein. And Einstein said, no, really what's happening, and I'm going to be simplifying this, obviously, it's like the sun is so big, so massive, that distorts space and time. And that's gravity. So what we are seeing is, you would say that the sun acts like a lens from everything that is around, so it distorts it. So what you're seeing, that Mercury is affected by that. Mercury is really where let's say, again simplifying, where Newton would say it would be, but you're perceiving it in a different place because of this. And that's part of what we call the general relativity. We have special relativity, we have general relativity. And that allows us to explain a lot of other things, right? But to be useful, the general relativity has to be able to explain all the previous ones. Now, again, this worked for around 100 years, or even less than that. And then we have quantum physics. And that's where we're today. Nobody was able so far, and we don't even know if there is, a real connection between quantum physics and classical physics, or Newtonian or Einsteinian physics. So gravity has been outside from quantum physics. And then we have the unifying theory and so on. We talk about that in some other videos. But you can see how every time that a new fact arises, you have to reconsider everything in the past and come up with a new explanation. Going back to the analogy of the land of facts towards the land of truth, that means that your bridge, you have to tear down your bridge once in a while and start rebuilding it again. So when people claim, oh, we achieved the peak of science, of knowledge, no, we haven't. That's the only thing that science guarantees us, is that we haven't. We're not at the local, we're at the global maximum. We need to, at some time, come down from where we are and climb another, even higher peak. So, when people say trust the science, it means that they don't understand how science works. You should never trust the science. Actually, as a scientist, you have to distrust science all the time. And in another way, we are all scientists. We're all observing the world around us. We're all learning. If we want, you can learn from other people's experiences. And science is basically that. Nobody goes and performs all the experiments that were made in the past, because you couldn't. There were way too many. So you have to rely on the experiences that other people publish. And then we have the, peer review. So you have some people who supposedly knows about what you're publishing for others, and say if you're right or not, which is tricky, especially in these days. But what I want you to understand is this idea that when you get to a certain level of complexity, you need to create a revolution. You need to start over. And I think this applies to a lot of things in our lives, even in our personal lives. If your life is getting too complicated, you need to stop, think, hopefully pray about your life and see, okay, how do I simplify this, right? What are the things that I'm doing that I probably shouldn't be wasting time, and it's preventing me to move forward. And if you're wise, you will find things that you're doing that don't have the value that sometimes they promise. Thinking like, in nature we have crabs and many animals that do have exoskeletons that they can't grow anymore because of the skeleton. So the process by which they shed that exoskeleton is called molting, if I recall correctly. But when they abandon that hardened exoskeleton, that shell that prevents them to keep growing, that complexity wall for them, they are vulnerable until the new one, it's hardened enough. So we see that all over the place. And in particular, I wanted to talk today about the AI. So I've been very vocal about my thoughts of AI. I'm not against AI at all. I think AI would be really cool, but I don't think that LLMs are AI. I don't think that they can solve problems that they haven't been trained on. They don't have the ability. They're just brute forcing using some clever techniques, neural networks, self-attention, that basically are interpolating, extracting patterns, but that's not real intelligence, right? So, but some people, especially the biggest problem that we cannot solve because it's inherent to the technology, are the hallucinations. So LLMs or AI, we just randomly say BS. I'm not talking about bachelor in science. So it's just making up stuff, and that makes it completely unreliable. But I had people arguing, well, no, that's because in order to use AI, you need to, first use sandbox, that basically is environments completely isolated from the real use, so you cannot override the database or expose it or delete anything important. Wouldn't have real world consequences. But then you also have to have human oversight, and you have to have several AI entities or agents that will be looking at your agent, and they will tell you if they see that what they are hallucinating. It doesn't make sense. It's really, for me, a very clear case of complexity wall, diminishing returns. We are not, with the current technology, we're not going anywhere. We're just spending trillions. We're just misusing energy to get something that is not reliable. And the only people that would benefit from that are the people who, are pushing it. The people who are inflating the bubbles. I call that the Elon Muskification of CEOs. Yeah, just say whatever. People will forget. People are stupid. We should be, living in Mars now, flying cars. I have zero respect from Elon Musk as an engineer. But a lot of people are doing the same thing. Sam Altman, I learned a lot of things about him. I'm really impressed about the power that he has, that he shouldn't. Snake oil salespeople, all of them. And we are going to be, paying for their party when the bubble finally collapses. So, okay, this been long enough. The other thing that comes to mind, if you never saw, I usually use the Rube Goldberg-ish word, and that refers to Rube Goldberg, who used to draw cartoons, how to solve very simple problems with very convoluted machinery. And if I find one, I will probably put it somewhere here so you can see what I'm talking about. But that's where we're getting with AI. It's becoming more and more Rube Goldberg. Now, there's people who love complexity because they think that if they understand the complexity, they are smarter than you. And I would argue that that is the dumbest thing to do, right? For some reason, science follows what is called Occam razors. Occam razors is actually Guillaume d'Occam, I think that's the name. He never wrote it directly like this, but he kind of explained this concept about the simple, if you have several explanations for a phenomenon, the simplest one is most likely the correct one. And that, again, is the way you deal with the complexity wall, is to find a simpler explanation. And most of the time, that's simpler, not always, right? But most of the time, it's a heuristic. Most of the time, that simpler explanation will be more correct than making your complex one even more complex. So I don't like people who are defending, their jobs, their existence, just by adding complexity. And then say, hey, I'm so smart because I know how to set up a sandbox for Gemini, and then use ChatGPT to overlook Gemini, and then, come on, guys. It's not working. Cool tool, definitely. I talk extensively about that. I think that they solved the language problem mostly in a way that makes sense, but they haven't reached intelligence. Language is not intelligence, right? So, okay, I said this would be too long a few minutes ago. So I just leave it here. Well, if you like this, if you learn something or make you think about something differently, yeah, share it with other people. You can share it even by clicking the share button. You can like it, you can subscribe, and well, we'll meet in the next one. Bye.